Welcome to the chaos sector. I have a question. Where is the surveillance footage? I mean, it's been over a year, and there hasn't been anything released that physically proves that Kohberger was in that neighborhood. A bunch of smoke and mirrors clogging up the investigation, red herrings dumped all over the place, alluding to this and that, yet the concrete evidence that would confirm that Kohberger was physically in that neighborhood, which has been claimed, just won't see the light of day. Perhaps when everyone just forgets about it. Hey? That's usually how the opposition operates. Moscow PD had to have more evidence that there was a white Hyundai Elantra, because you can't tell which type of vehicle is spotted in the Linda Lane surveillance. It isn't the gas station surveillance, because that vehicle conflicts with their time of death, approximately around 4:25 a.m. It would have to be the neighbor's camera that spotted the alleged Kohberger driving into the neighborhood. But as we all know, this footage has never been released. The only thing released was, of course, the so-called leaked screenshot of that security camera. In any other case where a person is either suspected of a crime or is literally arrested for the crime, and there is video footage, that is released to the media. It may not be released when the story breaks, but it's definitely coming out. You would see the suspect's vehicle driving into the neighborhood and then driving back out after committing the murders. After all, he's been arrested and charged. His DNA was discovered on a knife sheath. He apparently was stalking those housemates. Just go ahead. There's nothing that would jeopardize your charge, right? Release everything to the public. Even now, right? Moscow PD is compelled to keep this a secret. It's because there is no footage of Kohberger's vehicle driving in that neighborhood. The white Hyundai Elantra was there prior to the time frame they claim Kohberger was. This would be the same vehicle spotted in the gas station surveillance. We know this white Hyundai Elantra makes a right onto Troy Road and heads out of town around 3:45 a.m. This would not be Kohberger. It's leaving Moscow, so unless you want to revert back to the original time of death, which would be approximately in the 3 a.m. hour, we know that vehicle, which is the same make and model and color, is not Kohberger's vehicle. So if there is the same make, model, and color of the alleged killer's vehicle spotted speeding out of town around 3:45 a.m., well, most people would come to the conclusion that this is the perpetrator or involved in the crime. But here's the funny thing about that vehicle spotted in that surveillance. The path that it's traveling from would more than likely be from Blaine Street, which then you make a left onto White Avenue, and then, of course, drive to the intersection. But this is the same street that they claim Kohberger drove on when his phone allegedly came back online at approximately 4:48 a.m. What's so funny about this? You have two white Hyundai Elantras traveling on the same street in Blaine, and more than likely Kohberger, who would be, wait a minute. If they claim Kohberger was on Blaine Street and headed back to Pullman, wouldn't he more than likely take the same path the other white Hyundai Elantra took? If so, then why weren't there two white Hyundai Elantras spotted by that gas station surveillance? Ah yes, the fuckery just keeps getting better. You want to know what they did? We broke this down in the previous series. They used that vehicle's path, which was from the home, traveling onto Blaine Street, then White Avenue, then making that right onto Troy Road and hauled ass out of town and simply placed Kohberger on that same street. Based on his cell phone coming back online, his phone never pinged. On Blaine Street, the other white Hyundai Elantra, who is the actual suspect, drove on that road. Let's go back over this again. Here we examine the map. As you see, for that white Hyundai Elantra to be traveling down White Avenue and speeding, by the way, has a path that more than likely is traveling from the west. There isn't much traveling from the east. Oh, wait a minute again. There is a Taco Bell off of Blaine Street. Now who claimed to get to Taco Bell after they dropped off Kaylee and Maddie? Would that be the so-called private driver? Is that white Hyundai Elantra speeding down White Avenue the private driver? I know, we claimed it was a red Mustang. Yeah, that's in the grub truck surveillance. But based on the accounts of the private driver, didn't they provide a Taco Bell receipt to Moscow PD as some form of an alibi? There are several fucking so-called private drivers. That's the problem. We know this due to there being a different person being interviewed. That would be Batman. Could this be the person who crashed the white Hyundai Elantra in Oregon? That Taco Bell's drive-thru is open until 3 a.m. They just ordered food for the alibi, contemplated everything, planked in the parking lot, perhaps a few phone calls were made, and then hauled ass onto White Avenue, speeding out of town. I know it sounds too deep for some, but remember, the DoorDasher literally ordered and delivered the food. So Batman would also order food just to claim they were not involved in the murders. Heck, we can even suggest that Batman and Bonnie were orchestrating everything together. Batman heads to Taco Bell before skipping town, and Bonnie heads to Jack in a Crack, so-called delivering food to Xana. They leave town, then Bonnie arrives at the home about 15 minutes later with the so-called food. But the actual path and travel would be before the white Hyundai Elantra is spotted at 3:45 a.m., meaning while they're in sync with one another, Bonnie would get to the Crack around 3:30 a.m. perhaps, and Batman would be leaving Taco Bell around this time. Oh my fucking, it's becoming more and more visible to me. That white Hyundai Elantra was also in that neighborhood and had left about an hour prior, and then Bonnie arrives with the fake delivery. Batman is not a private driver, by the way, but this vehicle was used to frame Kohberger, but they fucked up the timing. Mind you, they are trying to time their movement with the actual murders, and they couldn't get that timing right. So instead of the actual time of death being in the 3 a.m. hour, the DoorDash delivery happened around 4 a.m. because Bonnie couldn't track exactly when the murders were finalized. They couldn't just sit in the area, waiting for the massacre to take place. They had to drive around in attempts to time when it took place, and then take action. The killers had to leave the home first, with everyone deceased, before she could make her way to the home. And Batman couldn't leave town yet until the murders were finalized as well. Once the word got out that the housemates were officially deceased, then Batman hauls ass out of town, then crashes the white Hyundai Elantra way the fuck in Oregon. Maybe Batman is Clyde would make sense since they're Bonnie and Clyde. Remember, the so-called private driver claimed he headed to Taco Bell after dropping the girls off. So if we look at the path from the house to Taco Bell, well, you're more than likely going to travel down Blaine Street, because Taco Bell is on Blaine Street. Mind you, just because the so-called private driver provided a receipt from Taco Bell as an alibi, we obviously don't know the time in which he ordered the food. It had to be before 3 a.m., of course. But if it's closer to 3 a.m. than 2 a.m., there's approximately 40 minutes of mysterious activity from this person. It takes about 5 minutes to travel from the victim's home to that Taco Bell. And if we factor in the white Hyundai Elantra traveling westbound on White Avenue, it's about a 98% chance that they are coming from that very Taco Bell. The so-called private driver claimed to go to Taco Bell after dropping the girls off. Then a white Hyundai Elantra is seen driving westbound on White Avenue, obviously coming from an intersection of White Avenue and Blaine Street, where Taco Bell is located. I think it's safe to say that this is the same person who spoke to authorities. But then again, there is a Jack in a Crack and Taco Bell right next to each other in, guess where? Pullman, Washington. The Crack's drive-thru is open 24 hours, and Taco Bell's drive-thru is open until 4 a.m. Bonnie is the DoorDasher. Clyde is driving the white Hyundai Elantra, more than likely his brother's vehicle, driving around trying to be spotted in surveillance to frame Kohberger. And guess who stays near these two important restaurants? That's right, Kohberger. His apartments are not too far from those restaurants. Seems they were literally right on top of their scapegoat that night. May have even drove by and took a photo of his vehicle. I guess this is how Batman came up with this whole "he stayed 1,200 feet from my doorstep" nonsense. See, they tried to frame Kohberger, but they fucked up their timing, which led to the white Hyundai Elantra, spotted in the gas station surveillance, becoming a mysterious vehicle. Remember, it was initially deemed a potential suspect, then it was ruled out. That was supposed to be the gotcha factor in framing Kohberger, but they couldn't get the timing right. The vehicle is leaving town at 3:45 a.m., but the DoorDash delivery was around 4 a.m., meaning the housemates were depicted as still being alive. So of course the white Hyundai Elantra spotted in the gas station surveillance can't be the alleged Kohberger. Once again, that vehicle, which matches the description of the alleged killer, is speeding down White Avenue, turns right onto Troy Road, and heads out of town. The gas clerk claims to not know which direction the vehicle headed, to cover up the fact that she did know which direction it headed, obviously onto the highway. And this would be approximately 15 to 20 minutes prior to the alleged Kohberger's return to the home for the attacks, and also contradicts the estimated time of death around 4:25 a.m. They never showed that surveillance footage, and they definitely won't show the other camera feeds which face the intersection. Now they ruled this vehicle out as the suspect. But somehow they obtained Koberger's license and registration in Pullman, which of course identified him. So this Elantra, parked in apartments in another state, searched by campus police, was looked into, but the white Hyundai Elantra, which was seen speeding in fucking Moscow, captured on surveillance, is just brushed off? Really? Who does that? Nobody, that's who? Oh, because it's not the same year of the white Hyundai Elantra you're looking for? Wow, that's brilliant detective work. Compared to what? You don't have another vehicle to compare years with. You can't compare it with the vehicle in the Linda Lane surveillance, because you can't tell if that's even a white Hyundai Elantra, in which they never identified it as such. Remember, they described that specific vehicle as, quote, a light-colored vehicle. So how do you rule out the white Hyundai Elantra on White Avenue if you don't have another white Hyundai Elantra to rule it out with? Are we on the same page here? They knew which vehicle was the suspect. No shocker there. It's a cover-up. Ruled that vehicle out because it is the suspect. Either they're one of the killers, the lookout, the one that carried out other duties in the murders. But it's obvious that this white Hyundai Elantra was speeding away from the scene of the crime. Oh, had a stop off at Taco Bell first, to make it appear they're just getting late-night grub. Yeah, clever thinking. It aligns with Bonnie. I'm telling you, it's the same tactic. She pretended to be a DoorDasher that night, dropping off the crack to the home. If she would pretend to deliver food to one of the victims who was already deceased, then it's plausible that the white Hyundai Elantra also pretended to get food as their alibi after dropping Kaylee and Maddie home. Once again, we have established that there are multiple people who are depicted as the private driver. If you want to include Eric Gower, so be it. There would be Eric Gower depicted as the private driver. Then you have someone being interviewed by Law and Crime. Then you have what appears to be a Mustang in the window's reflection, picking the girls up, which obviously was discovered later, crashed and abandoned with the smell of bleach inside the car, and this white Hyundai Elantra seen speeding down White Avenue, coming from the direction of where Taco Bell was located. Process of elimination here. Eric Gower is not the private driver. I think we've firmly proven that. This leaves the red Mustang, the individual being interviewed, and the white Hyundai Elantra spotted in surveillance on White Avenue. Well, based on evidence, I would still suggest that the red Mustang was the so-called private driver, considering the vehicle in the window's reflection appears to resemble the headlights and taillights of a Mustang. The vehicle was then crashed and abandoned with the forensics team inspecting it. Maddie's coat found near the fire hydrant. It all indicates there was a physical altercation, and perhaps Maddie's DNA was in that Mustang. Not to be too graphic, but we have to break all of these issues down. It is alleged that the owner of that red Mustang is abusive, right? Well, gets into a physical altercation with the girls, Maddie is attacked, and blood was left in that car. This is happening inside the vehicle, but once they got out of the vehicle, the abuser couldn't draw too much attention by aggressively following them. So they drove off as Kaylee and Maddie run back home. The phone calls Kaylee and Maddie made to Jack started around 2:30 a.m. That window between being dropped off, approximated to be around 2 a.m., till they got back home by running away, would align with the initial phone call at 2:30 a.m. We don't know what was happening within the house before the calls. Perhaps there was communication about what happened, and everyone was trying to figure out what to do. The last phone call was around 3 a.m., as we assume this was when both girls were attacked. Well, what would the white Hyundai Elantra be doing, assumed to be coming from Taco Bell? This may be the person interviewed, covering for the actual so-called private driver that night in the red Mustang. Moscow PD obtained the surveillance from that gas station and knew that the white Hyundai Elantra was involved, but it was never publicly reported by the mainstream media nor by their own reports that they identified a white Hyundai Elantra from any other video footage. This was the so-called evidence that they claimed they had regarding video footage that identified the vehicle. It was the gas station surveillance that literally identified a white Hyundai Elantra. But they claimed that wasn't the vehicle. Now this vehicle is speeding down White Avenue, makes a right onto Troy Road, which merges with Highway 8. And guess what, my friends? They saw this vehicle speeding down Highway 8 as well by the traffic camera. Idaho State Police and Moscow PD claimed they saw Koberger's vehicle heading out of town. Yeah, nice try. What you saw was a white Hyundai Elantra heading out of town approximately around 3:50 to 4 a.m. When the alleged Koberger was still trying to sneak into the home, and commit the fucking massacre. In other words, the vehicle they claim has been spotted all throughout Moscow was the very white Hyundai Elantra in the gas station surveillance. But that surveillance is not really the key. It's that damn vaulted neighbor's camera footage. If that was revealed, trust me, you'll see all types of vehicles in and out of that neighborhood, before, during, and after the murders. And also, the violence being heard, the screams, the dog barking, people yelling. They couldn't convince anyone that it was just one person responsible for that crime. So, it's going to be vaulted. And had the nerve to claim the only audio captured from that camera was a loud thud, whimpering sounds, and the dog barking. Talk about damage control. They took it to another level with that one, hey? Who the hell knows who's who and who did what? It's all tangled webs. That's what we're trying to figure out. But what we have figured out is Bonnie was a DoorDash driver, and she was described by one of the employees at the Crack who made the delivery for Xana. That's enough to build on regarding all of those sneaky drivers running around that night. And that opened up a can of maggots. Don't mind me, I'm just going off a hunch. This needs to be thoroughly examined because there is a trail of evidence in here somewhere. Let's stop right here, because this appears to be another circling piece of evidence. We'll just keep circling around it, like a bloodthirsty cluster of piranhas. This is the Chaos Sector,